This is CBC Vancouver News.
We're all worried about how our kids walk into the digital world and how they can be exploited.
How do we protect children and young people from sexual extortion? The tragic death of a 12-year-old boy in Prince George renews calls for better online protection. Plus,
you're with some of your best friends and you're helping out with something has quite a noble cause.
stepping up to help. Young people in Cranbrook volunteer at the local food bank as more people ask for help.
He loves his food, he loves his tickles, he follows you around as well. So it's like having a big stone dog.
And slow and steady to his new home. A giant tortoise found in a Richmond farm field is getting a new BC family. Good evening, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The shocking suicide of a 12-year-old boy in Prince George is renewing calls about how to protect children and youth from online sexual extortion. As Lindsay Duncombe explains, experts say it's often teenage boys who are the targets.
The 12-year-old BC boy who police say killed himself wasn't alone in his pain. Thousands of Canadian children share the shame of being sexually extorted online.
It makes me cry, it makes me sad, it makes me angry.
I'm speaking to a man we're calling Kyle. CBC News has agreed not to identify him. He says he considered suicide after someone threatened to expose explicit photos and videos.
I truly went through it myself, and I was trying to find an alternative way to kind of, have this story end.
Cybertip.ca receives 50 sextortion reports every week. Where genders were known, 91% of those reports came from boys. It says boys are typically targeted for money, girls for additional images.
There's multiple ways.
The White Hatters, a group of internet safety educators, have helped 300 young Canadians dealing with sexual extortion. It says the criminals usually don't share the intimate images. They just exploit victims' insecurity for cash.
We make it very clear to students in working in schools, don't pay the blackmail money, because more likely, and we've seen it, they're going to come back and ask for more.
The federal government continues to promise legislation to protect children online.
It's a complicated space to legislate in and on. But the urgency of moving, I think, is real.
Kyle paid $2,500 and reported the extortion to police.
But at the end, what people fail to realize is that there's so much going on in this world that a picture of yourself isn't worth you losing your life over.
A message he hopes young people hear and believe. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
One educator says programs to help youth are available, but they need more help to provide access to those at risk. Our Michelle Elliott spoke with Jesse Miller, the founder of Mediated Reality, on BC Today.
Education at the middle school level, dealing with sex education and awareness about being vulnerable online. How feasible is that? How possible?
Well, it's feasible and it exists. One of the points that is really important to recognize here, and it was brought up by the caller, and again, bringing those stories to the surface are important. We have not only curriculum, but programs like SOGI 123 that address issues that young people face. A 2017 study from the Oxford Institute for Internet Research highlighted that middle school kids don't have the mental capacity, the cerebral ability to navigate the social media world on top of their ever-changing world when it comes to peer-based interactions, hormonal changes, developmental changes, and again, environmental changes, going from environments that were very kind of primary to secondary and more independent. But when you add 24-hour communication to the mix and you have these in-depth relationships that occur and you have group chats, it's overwhelming for that capacity of brain. The thing here is that currently in our polarized communications around parents' rights and educators' responsibilities, it seems like there's a lot of critique that goes into places that target programs that are very effective at minimizing the risks that young people face, especially when a student is looking at their sexual orientation or gender identity. And it becomes this extreme of indoctrination or where we're leading children as opposed to giving them resources for when they are facing turmoil. So again, programs like sexual exploitation awareness, it's something that exists, but from the private sector coming into schools, social media awareness. I've presented in Prince George this calendar year. I've presented in the communities where this family resides. And so for people to raise monies, parent advisory councils to bring programs in, it's great, but we have so many resources that are available. It doesn't mean that a young person is going to utilize it unless, of course, they know that they can feel safe communicating. And again, we can't speak to the specific individual, but some kids just don't feel safe.
That was Jesse Miller, the founder of Mediated Reality, speaking on BC Today with Michelle Elliott. Stories like this can be very upsetting for some people. If you need help or know someone who does, they can reach the BC Crisis Centre 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. The number is 1-800-784-2433. That is also 1-800-SUICIDE. They offer help in more than 140 languages. The RCMP says a man has now been charged after a deadly hit-and-run at a Squamish bus stop last year. Mounties say on September 2nd of 2022, a driver lost control of a pickup at Pemberton Avenue and Cleveland Avenue around 11:30 at night. That truck hit two women, killing 44-year-old Gurpreet Sangha and leaving the second with life-altering injuries. Police said the driver ran off. Now, more than a year later, Mounties say John Cernos has been charged with impaired operation causing death and failing to stop after an accident causing death, among 6 counts. A spokesperson for the victim's family says they are grateful for the RCMP's support. Well, we're less in the red, but not expected to grow by as much. That is the latest diagnosis of BC's economy from the provincial government. As Mira Baines explains, the finance minister says the economy is being hit by higher interest rates and slower global growth.
The government focused its message on reassuring British Columbians about what it calls a stable and diversified budget. The key takeaway, the province's forecasted deficit is now at $5.6 billion, a $1.1 billion decrease from Q1's projection.
BC's economy and fiscal position remains stable. The economic outlook is slightly lower compared to Q1 as the global economy is slowing and more uncertain.
The deficit reduction was a result of primarily 2 factors: higher than expected corporate and personal income tax filings from the CRA, and the province factoring in $358 million from the federal government for wildfire costs. Firefighting and recovery costs are among the highest the province has ever seen, so that money from Ottawa helped BC's bottom line this quarter. Even so, the official opposition, BC United, says the province should not be running a deficit of this size.
Certainly the actual raw number of the deficit has changed for the better, but I would point out it is still a deficit, a record deficit in British Columbia. In fact, even through COVID, we did not see deficits of this size.
The province is also in the midst of a deepening housing crisis, with the finance minister admitting housing starts are expected to decline next year.
Similar to the private sector, the ministry expects housing starts to decline in 2024, reflecting higher interest rates, elevated construction costs, and labor constraints.
Conroy says she'll be meeting with the Economic Forecast Council to discuss the economy ahead of the next budget. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
A coalition of coastal First Nations is in Ottawa to fight the closure of fish farms. First Nations for Fin Fish Stewardship says salmon farming technology has advanced and past criticism of the industry is no longer relevant.
That's why we're pushing for the development of the Indigenous Centre for Aquatic Health Science, so we can do the science together, because so much of this has been about dueling science.
First Nations owned and operated fish farms provide 500 full-time jobs in remote communities, which the group says could not be easily replaced. Earlier this month, a different group of Indigenous leaders called First Nations Wild Salmon Alliance called on Ottawa to continue plans to transition away from open-net salmon farms in BC waters by 2025. Some parents are angry the Vancouver Park Board has now approved a more than 100% fee increase for field users. The board approved that hike, among other things, earlier this evening. Vancouver Little League says that will mean an extra $7,000 in fees. The board says the hike will deter permit holders from squatting on parkland. But one parent argues this is the same logic the board used to bring the fees in 2010.
And I guess their rationale now is, well, that didn't work, so we're going to charge more and maybe it'll work now. But it certainly didn't.
The league says they've had to travel to Richmond to practice, play, and host tournaments. Last night, the park board again debated what a bike lane through Stanley Park ought to look like. And as Justin McElroy tells us, their final decision means there may be no separated bike lane anytime soon, going against what they told the public last election.
ABC Vancouver made a promise when they got into power on the Stanley Park bike lane. And that promise isn't happening.
You should never overpromise on things, and in that case, I clearly overpromised.
That is Vancouver Councillor Mike Clausen, acknowledging that his original pledge that a fully restored bike lane through Stanley Park isn't coming to reality on the timeline he said. He, the mayor, and multiple park board commissioners all made the same pledge, that after years of debate, the temporary bike lane would come out, but that a permanent lane would come in.
To come up with a permanent solution that's safe and not temporary, that's surrounded by orange cones, is the way to go.
But that's not the case. Monday night, the park board received a report from staff saying it would cost up to $50 million for a permanent lane, and there is no money in the budget for it. No commissioner is asked to change the budget to make it happen, and the park board chair doesn't want to promise it will happen in the future.
Yeah, I'm not going to make any firm commitments right now. I've learned that until I get all the information, the report back yesterday, indicated that they are hearing from a large group, a very inclusive group of stakeholders and users of Stanley Park. So I want to hear back from that.
Which is fair, but it means two things. One, ABC is seeing the clear differences between campaigning and governing. And two, it means consultations will soon enter a fifth year over one single bike lane. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
TransLink reindeer buses are back on our roads here in Metro Vancouver, spreading some Christmas cheer and collecting donations.
It was just a couple of operators deciding to collect toys and take them to the Christmas Bureau, and it's grown to what it is now.
Bus drivers collect the donations of toys and cash through the Toys for Tots program, now in its 38th year. It's collected over 93,000 toys and raised more than $54,000. Frank the Tank has found his forever home. The giant tortoise was found in a farmer's field last month in Richmond. At first, it was a bit touch and go about whether Frank would even survive. But as Karen Larson reports, slow and steady has won this race.
A little nervous.
It's a big day for BC's best-known exotic tortoise.
Frank, what a good guy. Raring to go.
Frank the Tank is on the move, leaving the care of Maple Ridge SPCA, heading to his forever home at an undisclosed location somewhere in the province.
I'm feeling excited. It's been a long time coming. He's been in care for a little bit over a month and a half now, and we're just very excited that we're able to successfully get him into a fantastic home.
Frank might be excited too, but being a tortoise, it's hard to tell. Sulcata tortoises like Frank hail from the Sahara Desert, so it's no wonder that when he was found abandoned in a Richmond spinach field, he was in rough shape, having trouble breathing, suffering from shell rot. Mark Vosper with the BCSPCA fostered Frank back to health.
The first week, it was a little bit nerve-wracking. He came in, he had upper respiratory, he was really not well. He kind of led under the heat lamps. And he was just secreting liquid for those first few days. He'd been outside in the cold and the wet. He didn't want to eat anything the first few days.
Yeah, 16.9.
Frank is about 15 years old now, but could live to be 150 and could grow to be 5 times his current size, up to 90 kilos. Hence the tank part of his name. But being big and slow and not at all fluffy doesn't make him any less lovable.
He's a real character. He loves his food, he loves his tickles, and he follows you around as well. So it's like having a big stone dog.
Like all pets, Frank has some not so cute moments.
He likes to eat his own poop occasionally if you're not quick enough.
Frank's new family was chosen from hundreds of wannabe adoptees who applied when the story went international.
It's just been overwhelming with the amount of support and just people coming forward who want to know more about not only Frank the Tank, but sulcata tortoises, and just see where he ends up in his journey.
At his new home, he'll have lots of room to roam and lots of places to dig, the favorite pastime of sulcata tortoises like Frank the Tank. Karen Larson, CBC News, Maple Ridge.
Inflation has taken a big toll on many British Columbians. We're going to speak to a food bank director on the unprecedented surge in demand she is seeing right after this. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. For many, the holidays are not complete without a Christmas tree. But just like about everything this year, it might cost you a bit more. If you can find one, Yvette Brent explains.
Hunting for that perfect tree is tough enough.
Watch out, watch out.
Just ask this 10-year-old.
A fake tree isn't the same. You don't get to cut it or anything.
But fresh tree stock is scarce this year.
They smell so good. We want to try to continue this for as long as we feasibly can.
BC gets many of its trees from out of province, but cultivated pine trees are getting harder to find and more expensive. A decent 2-meter high Christmas tree will cost you $100 to $200.
We continue to have to raise our prices in order to make funds, and for the most part, we're just having to pass that cost off to the customer.
Well, for farmers, all the input costs are up. The cost of fertilizer's up, the cost of pesticides and sprays and everything else up. The cost of labor, it's very difficult to even get labor at a small farm. So all these input costs, fuel, everything is up.
Adding to the challenge, climate change. Heat waves and droughts are not making it any easier. Statistics Canada says this country has lost 1,000 tree farms in a decade, and that's starting to affect retailers. Even some nonprofits are cutting off online sales, otherwise they sell out too fast.
It definitely becomes challenging. We were able to make our way through COVID, which was extremely challenging, and I'd say this is even more challenging.
This year, a North Vancouver Lions Club could barely find 600 trees to sell. They usually buy closer to 1,600. That leaves them short about $30,000 in fundraising revenue they're offsetting with craft sales.
That's a big hole left by missing trees until planting again catches up with Christmas demand. Yvette Brent, CBC News, Vancouver.
The impact of inflation has taken a toll on many Canadians. A report from Food Banks Canada earlier this week found food bank usage rose to its highest level since the survey began in 1989. Now, to mark Giving Tuesday, we're now joined by Tresca Watson, the Director of Operations at the Mustard Seed Street Church, the largest food bank on Vancouver Island. Tresca, what is food bank demand like for the mustard seed this year?
Yeah, food bank demand is exactly as you were just describing. It's up in ways that we've never seen before. The levels are unprecedented, and that's a word we've used a lot in the last few years, but it adequately describes what we're seeing day in and day out.
Can you put a number on it? How many more people are you seeing?
Well, we're seeing, dozens of new people every day. Food bank use in BC is up over 60% since 2019 and 78.5% across the country since 2019. So we're seeing evidence of that daily. Dozens of new people are turning up at our doors every day.
Is there a certain demographic of people you're seeing more often, or is it everybody?
Well, all of our demographics are up. We see a lot of seniors, we see newcomers to Canada, we see families. The most startling demographic that we're seeing rise very quickly is double income earners. And that's a troubling one because we've not seen a lot of that in years gone by. And so what that's telling us is that, 2 income earners in the home are still finding it hard to make ends meet.
And if and when you, and as much as you're able to share, when you speak with people who are double income earners who are there to get some help, what do they say to you?
Well, we're just really happy that they've come through our doors. We want to make sure that everyone feels welcome and that they can access our services. But when we are speaking with them, we're hearing about the difficult decisions that they need to make. If you are struggling to make ends meet and you need to pay rent and you need to pay your hydro bill, those are the items that you're going to pay for first. And unfortunately, there just isn't enough left over for groceries a lot of the time.
What are some of the other initiatives you offer to help people dealing with food insecurity?
Yeah, we offer a hot meal program. We offer a program in the summer called Fair Start, which helps kids get new backpacks and new runners and school supply kits before they start school. We're just gearing up for our Christmas season where we're going to be distributing over 1,200 Christmas hampers to families with something a little extra special, some gift cards, some toys for children, fresh produce, and products for them to get through the Christmas season, just to make it a little extra special. Those are some of the things that we offer.
It's very busy right now, and we know food banks are first responders in the cost of living crisis. What long-term solutions do you want to see in the new year and beyond?
Yeah, that's a great question. It is really difficult to see so many people struggling. The long-term solutions are just that. There are lots of ways that we hope that governments at all levels can help contribute to reduce the cost of living. We're just really hopeful that something gives because there really has been no end in sight. The numbers that we're quoting tonight are actually from a study done in March. And here we are at the end of November, and things have changed quite a bit even since then.
Tresca Watson, the Director of Operations at the Mustard Seed Street Church. We appreciate your time and your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
There's a live shot of the White Rock Pier, still foggy across the south coast. Darius will have your BC-wide forecast right after this.
When the spring lobster season on PEI opened this season, something was missing. The mackerel and herring fisheries in the region stayed closed. Fishers rely on those species for bait. DFO shut them down in 2022 to give the stocks a chance to recover.
Certainly herring and mackerel are the big ones here on Prince Edward Island in terms of their important fisheries to us, and we'd like to get them reopened, and we realize these are science-based decisions, but you need accurate and timely information.
In his report, the Federal Environment Commissioner said DFO lacks the ability to collect timely and dependable data. The PEI Fishermen's Association says that is a cause for concern.
No one wants to be in a situation where a fishery's closed. That hurts everyone. And so these are the kinds of things that we need to ensure that we've got good information and good decisions are being made.
Ian McPherson says his association would like to see better ways of collecting information on fish stocks. The PEIFA is working on creating its own electronic logbooks that could give real-time data on catches, rather than waiting for the end of the season or longer.
A lot of the reporting now is done manually. A lot of it's not submitted till the end of the season. And DFO, they have resources devoted to it, but a lot of times we don't get a report on a fishery till about 6 months later.
The PEIFA and other groups are also watching closely what is happening with climate change. Water temperatures are rising, and no one knows exactly how that is going to impact fish stocks.
And we might even need to react quicker than, on an annual or biannual basis. So having real-time data is incredibly important, especially moving into the future as we start to think about how to manage for climate change.
The PEI Fishermen's Association would also like to see a task force set up that could do research on fish stocks after significant environmental events such as post-tropical storm Fiona.
Establish some baseline data. Hopefully we're going to see a bit bounce back in 2024, but at the end of the day it was a significant environmental impact.
The federal fisheries minister has responded to the commissioner's report, saying she agrees with all the recommendations and actions are already underway to address the issues. Nancy Russell, CBC News, Charlottetown.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox. On December 1st, join us for CBC British Columbia's annual Food Bank Day for a special day of broadcasts. The event is a yearly tradition for many, and we're bringing you a new edition of CBC's Food Bank Day that you can watch and stream live on CBC Gem and cbc.ca/BC. Make the season kind and donate at cbc.ca/foodbankday.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
Darius Madavi is here with our BC-wide weather forecast as the fog lingers at least on the south coast. Darius?
So what we have is this ridge of high pressure still in place over much of BC, keeping us dry. Still some cloud moving in, but dry and cooler than usual across most of BC. What we're going to see is that ridge finally moving off after about a week of being in place over BC late tomorrow. And then we start to see this next system starting to get a grip, and we see some lower pressure move into parts of the province. And actually over there, you can see quite a defined center of that system, so it will be quite a strong one, potentially bringing some strong gusty winds to parts of the north coast, but really just lots of moisture for us here on the south coast. And as we continue to watch that roll through, you can see it should be sticking around for a while now because we have another consistent forecast, just this time consistently rainy rather than consistently dry. If you take a look here, we did see that we had that next system roll through and hit the North Island by tomorrow night and then continue to make its way down to the South Island and Lower Vancouver by Thursday afternoon. And that's what we're going to see. And then another front should roll through, bringing more moisture on Friday and Saturday. If we take a look at our 48-hour accumulation, you can see still dry tomorrow, not until late at night that we start to see a bit of that moisture come to the North Island. And then if we continue to roll this through over the next 24 hours, that's when we start to see that moisture come to the rest of the south coast. And you can see considerable snowfall because the freezing levels and snow levels on the mountains will be quite low. But not too much rain, quite a bit for the west coast of the island, but really that's where the only place we're expecting to see a considerable amount of rainfall is the really periodic showers that we're expecting to see. But tomorrow, again, expect a foggy morning for the inner parts of the south coast. But other than that, just another cloudy and sunny day with a little bit of rain coming to the North Island. And if we take a look at our 5-day forecast here in Vancouver, like much of the island, this is what they're also going to see. We're looking at considerable morning fog tomorrow, especially for the inner parts of the south coast, and then just periodic showers holding right through the next few days. So expect this won't be continuous showers or rainfall right throughout the days, but it will come in and out. So expect a few hours of rain at least every day.
It's consistent. Thanks, Darius. That's your late news for Tuesday. Thank you for joining us tonight. For news anytime, check our website, cbc.ca/BC. Your next local news is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1 that begins tomorrow morning at 5:30. Have a good night.